The cool thing about this process of introducing multiple touch points is that data becomes a really powerful tool to inform marketing platforms, feeding that data into marketing distribution systems so that algorithms therein can then capture and leverage that data.
What are some of those things that kind of stand out to you? They're like, okay, we need to take a step back here. There's some things we're going to need to address before we even get started.
For us to scale well with any client, we need.
Today in the pod, we'll be speaking to Sanjay Mayar. He's a VP of Growth and Marketing at Imagery, an agency that's dedicated to really helping clients get the most from digital advertising. We'll be speaking to him about the importance of the post-click experience and the fact that having a strong post-click experience is really just table stakes if you want to get the most from your spend in digital arenas. Then we'll be talking about the importance of the complex journey and how breaking that journey into pieces can help the client to understand how they're effectively using their ad spend to be able to drive results. And then finally, we'll be talking about talking to stakeholders and how making sure that we're understanding stakeholders and their various different pain points can really help in how we communicate with them and help them understand if goals are actually being accomplished. Let's get started. Sanjay, thank you so much for making some time to be on the podcast today. We're happy to be able to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
As you know, our podcast really focuses on the post-click journey. So that aspect of the overall journey or experience after someone clicks on the ad. We know in your world, you spend a lot of time focused on advertising and media and driving that. But what we're excited about talking to you about is the fact that you really appreciate, perhaps more than a lot of others, that post-click experience is a critical component of making sure that you're getting the most from advertising, the most from that spend in media. And unfortunately, we don't always see that. We see a lot of people kind of get so enamored with just the media that they don't really appreciate how that full experience really has an impact. I'd love it if you could talk to us a little bit about how, when you're dealing with your clients and your experience in the industry, how you help people understand that if they really want to be serious about media, they also need to be serious about that post-click experience.
Yeah, I really like the way you framed that. So it's all, I mean, we call it a fatal flaw, right? You can have the best ad, the best targeting, the best offer. And if we don't have a strong landing page, a strong website, a strong nurture program in place, everything falls flat, right? So really, to me, the what we've seen in working with enterprise clients is the first step is education. So we need to make sure that everyone on board, all the stakeholders, understand that marketing's job isn't just to produce really great engagement and really strong ads. If our incentives are misaligned, then we're going to be working towards the wrong goal. So education comes in two forms: the client side and our side on the agency. On the agency side, we need to understand the business models, what success looks like to our clients and stakeholders involved. And on the client side, they need to understand what tools we have to work with, what our process is like. And then once we have that, then everything else falls into place, right? Whether we're talking about pipeline or whether we're talking about dashboard or how we do landing page optimization or how we work with the sales team or the lead nurture team. We have to look at this systemically so that everyone who works with us understands what problem we're solving. The stakeholders that we work with, we understand what their challenges are, and we speak to that at every touch point and at every conversation.
Having framed that so well, as you just did, when you kind of walk in the door, right? So this is a new client, a new organization. You're walking in the door. You're helping them to get set up. Obviously, you're doing some critical things. Again, on the media side, you're probably auditing their accounts, past performance, understanding where there's opportunities for optimization, for testing, for restructuring. But then as you kind of go to the other side of the equation and look kind of behind the door, right? And look at their post-click experience, what are some of those things that kind of stand out to you? They're like, okay, like we need to take a step back here. There's some things we're going to need to address before we even get started.
For us to scale well with any client, we need depth. So there's no way that we can grow what a client's already doing. There's no way that we can improve their status quo. There's no way that we can drive more pipeline, more sales without depth. And that depth comes in resources. So we need a creative library. We need internal points of contacts that can help us set up what we need. We need different assets as well, whether it's copy or white papers or whatever that is. We need the tools to measure how we're going to scale. So in the absence of those tools, that's something the agency can bring to the table as well. But we need to understand what we're going to measure and how we're going to measure it. Then we need to make sure we have those tools there as well. And then lastly, and not to be understated, there needs to be a large appetite for risk, right? So the agency's job is to mitigate risk, to be able to make calculated decisions and calculated choices that are going to maximize chance of success while minimizing, all the other risk factors, time, ad spend, that type of stuff. But the client needs to have an appetite for risk as well. So that doesn't mean it's blind. That doesn't mean that both parties aren't accountable, both to performance and to their responsibilities. But growth entails some risk, and without that appetite, without that type of entrepreneurial spirit, no marketing growth can succeed.
That's an excellent point. It's a challenge that even we have on our side, right, with our clients sometimes, and helping them to understand the context of what we're doing here, and that yes, we can set up the absolute best campaign, great touch points, great user experience. To your point, great advertising, creative, great targeting. All those things can be just like spot on, beautiful. But in the end, you're talking to people who are constantly in flux, who have all these pressures and other things kind of grabbing their attention. You're talking about a marketplace that's constantly in flux. Competitors are constantly changing. So it's only logical and reasonable to assume that there's an element of risk there, and we're going to have to learn and adjust and tweak and iterate along the way to make sure that we're making changes to keep up with the market, right? To make sure that we're moving in the right direction. And when the market takes those twists and turns, or when consumers do or competitors do, we're able to say, okay, how do we compensate? How do we make those same kind of adjustments and kind of keep pace and keep up with that? And that's just so critically important. So thank you for kind of calling that out.
Our whole job in marketing is to be able to make decisions with the information that we have on hand. And the things that we used to do, as you put it yesterday, right? Where with a different landscape, a different set of conditions in the market, a different type of behavior with competition. The things that made us really good at a certain scale with the conditions yesterday are not necessarily going to be the things that do well for us when we're trying to grow. And in fact, those are the things that can hurt us when we're trying to grow, right? So a good marketing team is going to come in both with a process to mitigate risk, but also a path to that's going to be different, and in some cases radically different than the things that were making a client successful yesterday.
So I wonder, obviously, as you're coming in, and you really hit on it well at the beginning, measurement tracking is such an important component of what you're doing, right? Because you have to be able to measure in order to be able to say, okay, what are we learning? How are we making these shifts? How are we improving performance and making things better? And in addition to that, how much stress do you put on the user experience, and what happens on the landing page, what happens on the PDP or the PLP, the overall website experience? How much stress do you put on that as a component of the overall performance of the campaigns you're driving?
It's definitely critical. One issue that I see just in the past, and I've been guilty of this, is we're not here to sell the spoon. We're here to sell the cereal. So when we go and we speak with clients and we say, here's how we're going to produce outstanding creative, or your tracking is flawed, here's how it's going to be improved, or here's our process for, conversion rate optimization to identify issues of UX, all that type of stuff. That's not the first conversation to have, right? It's not even honestly, it's not even the second or third conversation to have. Those are the what's. Those are the how we're going to solve your problem. What everyone wants is the cereal. What everyone wants is that end game of increased sales, increased revenue. So we need to illustrate, and it's our job as a marketing agency, a performance marketing agency, to understand exactly what that client wants. So what is your ultimate success metric? And then we work backwards from there. Right. So if the ultimate success metric is we need more sales qualified leads, well, let's work backwards from there to determine how do we drive that up there. Okay, we need to get more marketing qualified leads. Okay, what's the conversion rate there? Oh, okay, here's the problem. Your visitors aren't converting as efficiently as they could to NQLs. So here we need to work on messaging, and then let's have a conversation about UX and CRO. Okay, no, the issue is actually visitors are fine and they're converting. We have a pipeline problem. We're just not driving enough traffic to the site. Okay, here's how we're going to solve that with creative. So when we speak and when we frame solutions or optimizations or assets, whatever they are, we in the framework of here's how we're solving your ultimate problem, and here's how we can measure the impact of that. Everyone's on board, right? So we look at it. We look at the different components as tools to an end goal, as the spoon to get to the cereal. And when we maintain that narrative, and then when we can obviously deliver on it, and make it easy for clients to understand how their investments in asset production or optimization is ultimately driving real value for them. All we get are strong yeses and a lot of consensus.
That makes complete sense, right? I mean, you want to keep people focused on the ultimate objective here. What are you trying to do? What are the goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And then to your point, let's open the toolbox and let's kind of build the right experience that's going to allow us to get to that objective, to accomplish that goal, right? And sometimes it's going to be a hammer, and sometimes it's going to be a screwdriver, and sometimes it's going to be a wrench. Like what's the problem we're trying to solve here? What are we trying to fix? And that's really going to drive the results. So I like how you frame that and how you kind of position that to your clients to be able to do that. So I wonder, when you think about clients that have perhaps even a longer, more complex journeys, right? Um, how does that change the equation, so to speak? Because now you've got this a bit of a black hole that can kind of exist. It's one thing if you're selling a widget or a T-shirt, right? And most people just kind of come, they click on the ad, they go to the landing page or the product page, they see what they want. Okay, $10, add to cart, checkout, done, right? That's a fairly straightforward, easy experience. And you're still obviously going to have drop off, but there's a straightforward experience there. But when you're talking about high consideration items, maybe something that costs $1,000, a couple of $1,000s, maybe you're trying to generate a lead or a high price sale, that that black box, that black hole, so to speak, that exists between that initial click and that actual purchase, that becomes a lot more complicated. Maybe you have multiple touches, multiple visits to the site. You touched them before. You have nurture campaigns that are involved. Maybe it's 2 or 3 weeks before someone's actually ready to make the purchase. How do you help clients kind of navigate that black hole and make sure that, again, you're understanding, okay, where are the pain points here? How are we moving people through? And how are we ultimately measuring the effectiveness of our campaigns?
When we have a client who's got uh, a long and complex journey, the only way to solve for it is to reduce the length and reduce the complexity. Right. So if the journey is 120 days, whatever it is for a consumer from first interaction to purchase, and there are 2 conversion touch points, we'll never optimize that. There's your risk is too high, your data for decision making is too low, and you're going to have to be really lucky to make that work at scale. So we'll come in and we'll try to slice that 120 days into smaller conversion segments by introducing multiple touch points. And then that's the only way. We measure and we track everything down. And then our goal becomes, obviously we want to drive the ultimate KPI, but then marketing's goal becomes about shifting and nurturing that user down funnel from first interaction to last. And then we measure the efficiency and the effectiveness of what we're doing. we're not going to recreate the business model. So if that's what it takes for a user to convert, and it's, yeah, I agree with you 100%. The most challenging type of framework is one where you have a high value conversion and a low frequency of conversion. So by introducing other conversion events that denote and measure a client's intent and a client's um, uh, process down that funnel, um, we can quantify that behavior, and then we can do all sorts of things with it, right? So reporting is one. We can show reports to show to note to clients, here's how effective we are at driving, you know, uh, white paper downloads and webinar signups and video views and website traffic, and then ultimately to capture um, an MQL, whatever it is, phone number, email address, and then how that converts into SQL. So that's reporting is really critical. But the other critical component is feeding that data into ad platforms, into marketing distribution systems, so that the algorithms therein can then capture and leverage that data, right? So the cool thing about this process of introducing multiple touch points is that data and having all these conversion touch points becomes a tool, a really powerful tool to inform marketing platforms of the right type of user, so that they can make real-time decisions. The platforms, the AI engines in them, can make real-time decisions on who to target, how much to pay for that user, what creative to show them, and how aggressively to go after them. So data doesn't just become this passive, retroactive, Monday morning quarterback type of asset that we could use to look backwards and say we did well or we didn't. Data becomes an active agent in marketing that we're using at near real time to power ad platforms and make better decisions.
How does now AI play a role in all that, right? So you've built out obviously what is a bit of complexity in terms of making sure that you can kind of manage and move people through, appropriately measure what's happening as you move people through. Is AI able to help with that? And how do you see it doing that today and maybe even in the future?
Yeah, it is great question. So I look at AI with respect to performance marketing um, in two dimensions. So one would be LLMs, so your ChatGPTs and Gemini and everything else, and the other one would be the AI integration. Let's call it machine learning within different platforms, right? So LLMs, we've been integrating them into our workflow, right? So it's we haven't replaced anybody. We're not planning on it. We don't recommend clients replace anyone with it. Really, we look at it as a companion tool. So how can it help us in our process? How can we integrate them more into different things like analysis, or I use it with RFPs. And the main sort of through line has been, whether you're in creative or BI, business intelligence, or you're client facing, but from the marketing side, the real sort of through line throughout all the different departments has been train the LLM to be a version of you, right? So understand what your blind spots are, or what takes a ton of time in terms of labor or busy work or whatever on your side, and then train the LLM to do the things that you can evaluate as good or bad as the output, but it's there to just speed things up, right? So we've seen a lot of success there. We've created different agents that act as versions of ourselves, where we're the driver, it's the editor. So we look at its output, we give comments, it looks at our output, it gives comments, and then it just allows us to move more quickly. And we'll probably find deeper ways to use that, but that's been the through line. But what's been radically game changing, and it's less, we see it less on the news and stuff like that, but it's certainly on marketing circles, has been the integration of AI into everything within ad platform. So, campaign types, keyword optimization, audience selection, um, all sorts of ways. We talked about scaling earlier. Like AI is now fundamental to how ad operators, how strategists, how tacticians um, plan campaigns, execute campaigns, and manage campaigns, right? It's completely integrated. Isn't a checkbox that we put. It is fundamentally in the ad DNA with everything we do. And it's been like that, for about a decade now. Obviously accelerated in the last few years. But anyone who goes on Instagram knows that their feed is being um, curated by AI, right? And it's the same sort of technology that allows ad operators like us to build an audience, to optimize campaigns, to scale them out, to make decisions. So it's the same sort of underlying technology that's been useful for ad operators, and it's changed how we work. Um, you know, um, we adopted AI as part of our is how we build campaigns and fundamental to the ad team early on. Um, it's been a game changer for us, specifically being able to feed first party data, customer match data into the ad platforms to allow it to make value based decisions as opposed to, you know, building a campaign, targeting this demographic with this type of message, each of them broken out discrete, we sort of cross our fingers. Um, we've opened the door to AI to allow it to be a hands-on operator in our ad campaigns. We feed it all the data it needs to make really good, smart decisions. Um, and the results speak for themselves that it's just been uh, radically fundamental and transformative in how we define ourselves as performance marketers.
As you explained it makes good sense. Like we alluded to earlier, the market's in constant flux, and you've got to make these twists and turns to keep up. So here, AI is able to kind of more quickly, perhaps, see how the market is making those shifts, has it's being fed real time data, and then able to say, okay, based on this shift, like here's where we need to turn, here's where we need to twist, right, and help you kind of just keep up that much more quickly. So it makes sense that you guys are leveraging it on the ad operation side, but also great to hear how you're using it on the back end to also help inform decisions, to help kind of surface key information, to surface those insights, but still you guys keeping control and allowing your human intelligence, right, to end up actually helping to make the decisions and saying, okay, this is where we need to further kind of move things forward when it comes to more strategically how we're trying to accomplish the objectives and goals that you have in coordination with your clients. I wonder, because of the complexity of everything that's happening, both on the ad operation side and then ultimately on the post click side, with some of the processes that you're helping your clients with from a user experience standpoint, from a tracking standpoint, maybe even those kind of micro conversions that you're setting up. You mentioned kind of breaking things into pieces. So maybe even like looking at the customer journey in a staged approach where you're kind of saying, okay, if this person's in the awareness phase of a long and complex journey, what is reasonably their goal? It's not to purchase, but maybe we can get them to sign up for emails or whatever the action might be, right? As you think about all those tactics and activities that you're doing, how are you able to kind of take that and kind of package that in a way that you're able to now kind of report on that to your clients, especially if they now need to take this information and say, okay, I need to show this to my CMO. I need to take this to, an executive meeting. And they're not concerned with kind of the ins and outs and the kind of the micro conversions and details of it. How do you package that in a way that makes sense for the executive to be able to see this is the direction we're going and this is how we're reaching our goals?
So it's a great question. One of my I took my degrees in journalism of all things, right? So I didn't do I did a business degree later in life, but I started and did a journalism degree in undergrad. One of the first things our professors taught us was how to write an article in a way that's not going to force people to read it to the end, but um, understands how people consume information. And so when you read an article, and you tell me how you guys read articles. But if when you read an article, read the paragraph first, the lead paragraph. You'll read the second, and then you'll read the third, and then you'll probably drop off. So what you want to do is front load the most important information in that first headline and then paragraph and subsequent paragraphs so that everything feeds logically and that people who, the 95% of people who read an article for the, first three paragraphs get all the cogent information. And reporting needs to do the exact same thing. So big, dense, comprehensive reports that have a wealth of information in them, but obliges a C-suite level executive to devote 10 minutes into extracting that information is garbage. It's not going to work, right? So framing the data in a way where the most cogent, impactful information is presented first, and then every scroll or every other depth of information where that reader proceeds just reinforces that first bit. That's the way to do it, right? So working off that framework, what we've done is we've built an infrastructure where we collect information from multiple different platforms. So we'll collect it from Meta, Google, email platform, affiliates, etc. Google Analytics. We'll blend that data together in a data warehouse. And then once it's in the data warehouse, there's lots of different things we can do with it. We could do predictive analytics. We could, give clients access to it so they could pull their own reporting. But we then prepare visual reporting, some dashboards for different clients. And they're really meant to be frictionless. They're meant so that they update automatically. A CEO or CMO loads it in the morning, sees the data, understands exactly how their investment's doing. And then we package it out as well so that we're showing the success metrics that make sense for what we're trying to do for a particular user. So if we're running awareness campaigns and consideration campaigns and intent campaigns, we're not judging them all based on how many sales they're driving, right? No one's optimizing their YouTube ad based on revenue. So we're showing the different KPIs for each respective set of where that user is down the line. So the top of the report will start with sales, and then we'll work backwards from there. So here's the revenue, here's the sales, here's the SQLs, here's the MQLs, here are all the intent conversions, here are all the consideration conversions, here are all the awareness conversions. Here's the efficiency and effectiveness of each. So how many we're driving and by what rate we're driving them at. And then once we have that, then we can start evaluating them based on how well we're doing relative to last week, relative to last month, relative to last quarter, relative to last year. We can then introduce dimensionality. So, how are the YouTube videos doing relative to the LinkedIn videos, let's say. And then we're comparing each to their own respective based on what we want that particular ad asset or ad campaign to do. Right. So we don't want to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. We want to make sure that each campaign is driving what it's supposed to do at the rate and at the effectiveness that it's supposed to do. And we want to make sure that that information is almost instantly communicated to our clients so that they can focus on what they need to do. And then when we inform them of, what decisions we're making, everyone has access to the exact same level of information so that we're all on board.
Now, you touched on a lot there, and we're so happy you did. And one of the things that you touched on was some of the technical setup of how you kind of get to where you're going to, right? So feeding this information into the data warehouse and then being able to then leverage the data warehouse as the source of truth for information, and then to be able to visualize it so that the different stakeholders are able to look at it in a way that's useful to them. And I don't want to minimize that because it goes back to one of the things you said very early in our conversation, which is the importance of making sure that things are set up appropriately when you walk in the door, or that perhaps that's one of the first things you do when walking in the door is saying, hey, let's get things set up appropriately, because it can take a lot of work to get it to the point where the data is clean enough that you can load it into a data warehouse, stitch together, and then make it so that you can easily report on it in real time. In fact, I used the word easy and I shouldn't have, because it's not necessarily easy. You hope to get to the point where it's straightforward, and I guess we can leave it at that.
It takes a lot of work to make it easy.
Exactly, 100%, right? So that kind of leads me to, I think, a good place for us to kind of begin to wrap up our conversation, and that's one of the things that's most intimidating for marketers about the post-click experience is the fact that it takes so much alignment between so many different team members, right? So it's not just the performance marketers that are involved. It's not just data analysts are involved, but it's also the data engineers, right? It's IT, it's the UX people, right? There's so many different people that all kind of have to be on the same page in order to create the experience, in order to measure the experience, in order to visualize what's happening, to report on it, and then to be able to say, okay, now we have the data we need to optimize. So I wonder, just what's kind of your philosophy when it comes to being collaborative, right? So as you kind of walk into a client, you're working with perhaps a number of their internal teams. Now, your main contact may perhaps be a marketing person, but you're going to have to interact with different people outside of their marketing team in order to accomplish the things you want to do. What is your kind of mindset as you kind of approach that?
The biggest win that we can drive for a client is to bring order to whatever chaos they have. Right. So that's the biggest win that we can do. The way we do that is we've done our homework, our discovery on the different third-party tools that we need in order to solve 95% of tracking issues. So a standard pain point might be, how do I get the data from meta ads into my data warehouse? How do I get the data from my CRM to blend with the data that I'm extracting from meta ads to live in the data warehouse, right? So, my region has laws that says users can opt out of cookies, and when they do, I lose a ton of data. Hey, everyone who converts on Google Ads, I see a huge amount of attribution associated to Google Ads platform that doesn't align with what my own internal reporting shows, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these sort of data problems. So data cleanup is massively important. And with dirty data, we can't do much. But also, as complexity grows, as marketers want to engage in different channels, as the types of campaigns grow, as the number of assets grow, we want to be able to track cleanly, and we want to be able to make good decisions. And we also want to be able to feed this data back into ad platforms. So our big value add is we can come in to an ecosystem and say, hey, we found the tools that allow us to do this, right? And it's unfortunately not one out of the box, shiny tool that makes everything work. It's a variety of different tools that have to interact together, right? And so there are a near infinite amount of options. And as as things become more complex, the more options will emerge, and so we'll vet them. But we have a really good, strong suite of partners on the data side. We have our own internal operations team and BI team as well that can interact with their counterparts on the client side. And our value add is being able to come in and say, we've vetted these tools, we've done these process, we've done the homework, we figured out how this works, and here's what we need to get to apply those, that order to this chaos, so that you can get the result that you want, which is great clean data to be able to make decisions, and good clean data to be able to feed back into ad platforms. So, some challenges we've been seeing has really just been about linking internal data and internal CRM data. That's been maybe, there was one owner internally, and then they left, and then another group came in and they took over, and then another group came in and they took over, and all of a sudden you had this like Frankenstein build that everyone had good intentions to maintain, but it comes out, now the person who's inherited the like fourth generation of it is just shaking their head and saying, "What? Hey, I got to nuke this and start over." So we can work. That's a case by case thing, and we can work with clients to set that out. But if to sort that out, but if a client has questions on how do I blend all my app platform data with all my analytics data in a way where I can have easy access to reporting, where I can, I'm future proofed against things like cookie management and all the rest, and I can have the answers that I need. We've solved for that. Right? We've built a suite of different tools and relationships with different partners to have solved for that. Our reporting and our reporting infrastructure is incredibly powerful. It gives the answers that executives want, and it feeds the data that app platforms want to make better decisions.
That way, when you're showing up to work, you're showing up not just with the right experts on the team, but each expert has their own toolbox with them so that they're ready kind of to jump in, right, and get their hands dirty and say, "Hey, what do you already have, client, and what do you need? Okay, well, let me go to my truck and get what we need, and now together we can make this happen. We can solve this problem, and we can move things forward." So, what a great way and a great just kind of mindset to be able to approach things as you're looking to help your clients. Sanjay, thank you so much for your time today. We're really happy to buy out some of your precious time to be able to talk to us, to share your insights and experience, and so happy to have had you.
Likewise, I really enjoyed the discussion. Great questions, great insights. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Shamir.